It started like any other morning in a small Kentucky town. Quiet, unassuming, ordinary. 17-year-old Jessica Dishon had the house to herself. Her parents had left for work. Her younger brothers were off to school. Jessica was supposed to leave soon, too, drive her red Pontiac to Bullitt Central High, and carry on with her senior year. But she never made it. When her mother returned home shortly after noon, something felt wrong. Jessica's car was still in the driveway, keys untouched. The door ajar. Her phone sat on the seat, screen lit up, frozen on the digits 9 to 1. She had tried to call for help, but she never finished dialing. Inside the car, one shoe, textbooks, purse, her work clothes, her entire world left behind. It was like she had vanished mid-thought. Her mother's heartbeat quickened as dread crept in. Jessica wasn't in her room. She wasn't at school either. The car wasn't broken. The school hadn't called. And now, the truth was setting in. Something had gone horribly wrong. But when they called the sheriff, he shrugged it off. She probably wandered off, he said. Wandered off with no shoes, no phone, and a 911 call hanging in limbo? The response was more than careless. It was criminally negligent. Jessica's family knew their daughter. She was responsible, smart. She had dreams, college, accounting, a life of her own. She didn't just vanish. But for the local authorities, that wasn't enough to take action. And that's when Jessica's parents made a chilling decision. If the police wouldn't help, they'd find her themselves. If you're not already gripping your seat, you will be. Because what this family uncovered, what the system failed to stop, and the horror that unfolded next, would leave even seasoned agents speechless. Stay with us. Jessica Dishon had been missing for less than a day, and already her parents knew they were on their own. No Amber Alert. No roadblocks. No organized search team. Just a cold dismissal from the sheriff's office and a deepening sense of panic. But this wasn't a family that would sit still. Her father, Mike Dishon, a quiet but determined man, quickly rallied relatives and friends. They made flyers, canvassed neighborhoods, and questioned classmates, co-workers, anyone who might have seen her. They started searching along roadsides, fields, and creeks near their home on the rural outskirts of Shepherdsville. The terrain was unforgiving, thick brush, tall grass, old gravel roads that hadn't seen a car in weeks. But it didn't matter. They pressed on. Jessica's Uncle Stanley, a man who knew the land like the back of his hand, suggested checking near the Salt River, an area notorious for drug deals, petty crimes, and the kind of activity most people avoided. That's where they went, down winding paths, past abandoned vehicles, into dark thickets that reeked of danger. Nothing. Just an endless silence that mocked them at every turn. And then something chilling. The next morning, Jessica's younger brother burst into the house, face pale, eyes wide. He said he'd heard a scream, faint, female, and coming from somewhere beyond the trees. A cry for help? Jessica's father didn't hesitate. He grabbed his shotgun and charged into the woods, heart pounding, fear rising. Was she still alive? As he ran, a strange sight stopped him in his tracks, smoke rising from the neighboring property. It was coming from David Brooks' land, a 40-year-old man who'd once been friendly with the family. But now, something about him seemed off. He stood beside the flames, calmly feeding women's clothing into the fire. Jessica's father confronted him. "Mind if we look around?" he asked. Brooks' answer? "No. Get off my property." And just like that, the first true suspect emerged, not from police work, but from a father's desperation. What would you do if the one person acting guilty lived next door and the police still refused to act? Coming up, the red flags get brighter, and so do the lies. David Brooks had always been odd, quiet, watchful, but nothing that would have raised alarm until Jessica disappeared. After that, everything changed. He started driving slowly past the Dishon home every day, always alone, always staring. Sometimes he smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was something darker, sinister. Then came the phone calls. No words, just breathing. Heavy, male, intentional. Jessica's parents were terrified. They were sure it was Brooks, but they had no proof, only a gut feeling and a burning suspicion. Still, they reported it. Again, and once again the police shrugged. That's when the Dishons took it even further. They told the police what they saw, Brooks burning clothes. They asked them to bring cadaver dogs. This time, the sheriff agreed. But just barely. The dogs, trained to track the scent of death, were given Jessica's clothing. They didn't hesitate. They pulled toward Brooks's fire pit, right where the smoke had risen days earlier. There, they found black gloves in one of Brooks's sheds, gloves laced with the faint smell of decomposition. And still, nothing happened. The sheriff reported no substantial evidence. No arrest. No real follow-up. Just silence. Brooks? He acted like nothing happened. But his behavior grew even more disturbing. He stayed close. Watched them. And yet he never ran. Almost as if he believed he'd gotten away with it. A missing girl. A suspicious neighbor. Clues stacking up like a house of cards, and no one knocking it down. Until now. In the next chapter, the Dishons escalate the case to the one agency that might finally care, the FBI. The Dishons had hit a wall. Their daughter was gone. A man next door was burning clothes. Cadaver dogs led to his shed. Black gloves reeked of decay. But the local police? They didn't care. So, Jessica's father did what many small-town families fear. He went over their heads. He called the FBI. At first, it felt like another dead end. The Bureau typically didn't intervene without solid leads or jurisdiction. But something about this case, the total collapse of basic protocol, the scent-trailing gloves, the botched evidence, made them pause. They sent agents to Shepherdsville, and instantly the tone changed. Unlike the sheriff, the FBI didn't show up empty-handed. They collected fingerprints from Jessica's room and car. They seized clothing, notebooks, and her phone. Everything went straight to the lab. No shortcuts. No excuses. They pulled out aerial maps. Helicopters scanned fields. Divers searched nearby ponds. Volunteers combed wooded areas the Dishons had already walked a dozen times. But this time it was official. Then came the break. Inside one of Brooks's sheds, FBI agents found a printed photo of Jessica. Why would a grown man, who claimed to barely know her, have a portrait of a teenage girl hidden among tools and ash? They didn't have enough for an arrest yet, but they were getting close. Then something else happened. Brooks's brother Joseph, quiet, withdrawn, and evasive, started acting strange too. During a visit to the property, he refused to speak. His behavior spiked alarms with seasoned agents. 2 suspects, 1 family, and the clock ticking louder than ever. The FBI was closing in, but they didn't know yet. Jessica's fate had already been sealed. The clock hadn't just ticked, it had run out. That's how long Jessica Dishon had been missing. The media had picked up the story. Flyers covered storefronts. Her face became a haunting reminder of what the system failed to prevent. And still no trace of her. Then came the call. A woman was driving near the Salt River. The same area Jessica's father had searched desperately just days after she vanished. Something off the road caught her eye. A shape near a tree. She pulled over and walked closer. What she saw stopped her cold. It was a body. The FBI arrived within the hour. The terrain was dense, humid, and overgrown. But there, partially concealed by brush, lay the remains of a young woman. She was missing fingers and limbs, her body tied with rope that had streaks of red and silver paint. Her clothes were partially removed. There were bruises, signs of trauma, a story told through scars, one that spoke of violence, struggle, and pain. Jessica's mother was called to the scene. She didn't want to believe it. The face was no longer recognizable. But then she saw the butterfly tattoo. Same spot, same design. It was Jessica. The coroner later confirmed it, death by strangulation. But that wasn't the worst part. The condition of her body told them something else. Jessica had been alive for 3 days after her disappearance. 3 days. While the police told her parents she probably ran off, while her father begged them to investigate, while her neighbor was burning clothes in the backyard, Jessica was out there, somewhere, fighting to survive, and they missed their chance to save her. This wasn't just a murder. This was a preventable tragedy, and the very people who should have protected her had failed her the most. With Jessica's body found and confirmed, the FBI moved fast. They brought David Brooks back in for questioning. The friendly neighbor with the fire pit was suddenly in the hot seat. And this time, his story changed. At first, he told investigators he had seen Jessica the morning she disappeared. But under pressure, he flipped. Now, he claimed he hadn't seen her at all. His alibi? He was home, in bed with his wife. But when agents spoke to his wife, she contradicted everything. The lie unraveled. Then came the curveball. An agent leaned forward and asked, "What would you do if we found your fingerprints on her body?" Brooks paused. He didn't laugh. He didn't deny it. Instead, he gave an answer that sent a chill down the agent's spines. Then I'd have to confess. There were no fingerprints, but that answer, it said more than any lab test could. Brooks also agreed to take a polygraph. He failed. There was no physical evidence, no DNA, no eyewitnesses, but every piece of behavior screamed guilt. Investigators had seen this before. The lying, the evasion, the nervous tells. It was textbook. The problem? It wasn't enough for a conviction. But then something clicked. Not in the lab, not in the courtroom, but in memory. Investigators remembered something buried in the files, and it just might crack this case wide open. As the FBI prepared for trial, they dug deeper into every shred of potential evidence, even items once thought irrelevant. Then it surfaced a rope. Investigators had seized it from Brooks's vehicle during an earlier search. It wasn't logged as critical at the time, just another piece of farm equipment, maybe. But now, with Jessica's autopsy confirming a rope had bound her legs, red and silver paint flecks still visible, the comparison became chilling. The rope from Brooks's car matched, same thickness, same color residue, same frayed ends. There was one problem, no DNA. The killer had either been careful or the evidence had degraded too much. Still, it was one more puzzle piece snapping into place with unnerving precision. Meanwhile, preparations for the trial picked up steam. Prosecutors combed through the timeline, witness statements, and circumstantial links tying Brooks to Jessica. It wasn't a slam dunk, not without hard forensic evidence, but it was enough to charge. Then, the prosecution uncovered a new disaster. When Jessica's limbs and fingers were recovered near her body, they had been placed into sealed containers with clear, refrigerate immediately warnings. The local police ignored the labels. Instead, the remains were stored at room temperature, destroying what might have been the only DNA evidence connecting Brooks to the murder. An inexcusable error. Potential fingerprints, hair fibers, or fluids, gone forever. All because of negligence. The same theme that had haunted this case from the very beginning. Still, the FBI moved forward. They had no choice. A man they believed to be a predator walked free for 15 years. But now, he was finally going to face the truth in court. It was January 2003 when David Brooks stood in court, accused of abducting, torturing, and murdering Jessica Dishon. But this wasn't a trial built on slam-dunk evidence. It was built on suspicion, patterns, and behavior. The defense wasted no time. They pointed out the obvious: no fingerprints, no DNA, no weapon, no eyewitness. The rope? Circumstantial. The gloves? Unproven. The photo of Jessica in his shed? Creepy but not illegal. His attorney hammered the point. You have no physical evidence tying my client to this murder. And technically he was right. But the prosecution pushed back. They presented a chilling timeline. Jessica's cry for help caught mid-dial at 9-1, her belongings found undisturbed in her car. Brooks seen burning clothes within hours of her disappearance. His own contradictions under interrogation. And a chilling response. Then I'd have to confess. Then came the jaw-dropping revelation. The mishandling of Jessica's remains. The refrigerated containers that were left in the open. A chance at DNA, sabotaged by incompetence. The courtroom felt split, half angered by the police failure, half unsure if that failure meant the wrong man was on trial. Jurors looked uncomfortable. Even the judge appeared frustrated. The FBI's work had been thorough, But they were building a case on crumbs, not concrete. By the end of closing arguments, one truth was clear. Jessica Dishon had been failed at every level by her local law enforcement, by careless evidence storage, and perhaps now by a justice system that demanded certainty, not just suspicion. A jury would soon decide David Brooks' fate, but nothing, not a guilty verdict, not an acquittal, could undo what had already happened. The jury deliberated. Hours passed, then a decision. Mistrial. There just wasn't enough. No hard proof. No smoking gun. Just circumstantial evidence, conflicting testimonies, and a mountain of doubt. The judge declared a mistrial, and David Brooks walked free. Jessica's parents were shattered, not just by grief, but by injustice. They had done everything. They searched for her, fought the sheriff's indifference, contacted the FBI, and even then, the system failed them again. The man they believed responsible for their daughter's murder, now walking the streets. In the years that followed, the Dishon family tried to rebuild, but the pain lingered. The trial reopened wounds that hadn't healed. There was no closure, no punishment, just silence. For 15 years, Jessica's name faded from the headlines, but never from her family's memory. Until 2013, a cold case unit revisited the file. New technology, new eyes, and a new suspect. Someone who had flown under the radar the entire time. Stanley Dishon, Jessica's uncle. The same man who helped lead the early search parties. The same man who had consoled Jessica's parents in their darkest hours. His DNA, now finally testable with modern tools, matched evidence recovered from Jessica's body. It was a betrayal beyond comprehension. He was arrested, confessed, and in 2015, pleaded guilty to Jessica Dishon's murder. Everything the family thought they knew collapsed. The real killer wasn't the man next door. It was the man sitting at their kitchen table. The man who hugged Jessica's mother. The man who cried at her funeral. The arrest of Stanley Dishon, Jessica's own uncle, sent shockwaves through the Dishon family. For years, they had trusted him. He'd walked alongside them through search parties, sat beside them in court, grieved with them, and all the while he knew. The truth unraveled like a nightmare. DNA linked him to the crime. Then came his confession. He had sexually assaulted and murdered Jessica. All those suspicions cast on David Brooks? Misplaced. All the clues? Misinterpreted. A monstrous lie had been hiding inside the family itself. Worse still, he admitted Jessica had tried to escape. That's why her phone was found with 9 to 1 dialed. That's why one of her shoes was left behind. She had fought. She had tried to live, and no one came. It wasn't just betrayal. It was psychological devastation. For her parents, it felt like losing Jessica all over again. They had spent years blaming the wrong man, wasting time, energy, and tears while the true predator slept under their own family name. Stanley Dishon was sentenced to 20 years in prison after a plea deal. The sentence felt short, insulting, but the family accepted it, not for justice, but for peace, for the truth. And maybe that's the worst part about true crime. Sometimes, even when you get answers, they don't heal. They scar. Jessica Dishon's story doesn't end with a trial or even a confession, because what happened to her echoes far beyond a single crime. It's a lesson in failure. Failure by local law enforcement. Failure to act on red flags. Failure to protect a young girl who had done everything right, good grades, big dreams, and a life she was just beginning to build. But it's also a lesson in resilience. Her family refused to be silenced. They fought harder than most. They exposed cracks in the system and forced attention where none existed. They brought in the FBI. They shook their town awake. And even when the truth shattered them, they faced it. Jessica was only 17, but her story speaks louder than most. She wasn't just a victim of a predator. She was a victim of a system that overlooked her again and again. Today, her case is taught in criminal justice classes, not for how it was solved, but for how badly it was mishandled. Jessica's name is no longer a missing poster. It's a warning, a call for better policing, for believing families when they say, "This is not like her." for acting fast, for never assuming a girl just walked away. If you took anything from this story, let it be this: speak up, ask questions, challenge silence. Because sometimes the truth is hiding in plain sight, and someone's life depends on whether or not you notice. If Jessica's story moved you, comment, and subscribe for more true crime cases that demand justice. Hit the bell so you don't miss our next episode. Drop a comment. What do you think should have been done differently? Share this video. Let Jessica's voice echo further than it ever could on its own.